Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us at the Knight Frank Healthcare Real Estate Valuation webinar. My name is Shazad, and I look after the healthcare and education practice within Knight Frank, and I'm joined with Steve Flanagan, who heads our valuation business. Steve, would you like to?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Flanagan, after the real estate valuation and advisory business for Knight Frank in the Middle East. And my background is valuation, consultancy, surveyor, and valuer. And I provide valuation across all asset classes for a wide range of banking, developer, fund, and investor clients. I've personally been in the Middle East for about 13 years, and with Knight Frank for the last 9 years, based out of Dubai. But my coverage is mostly the UAE and Saudi Arabia.
Myself, I'm FCCA. I've been with the Big Four for about 9 odd years, and then with in the Middle East since 2013. I've been with Colliers before, and now since 2018, I've been with Knight Frank. And I'll come to our team in the slides ahead.
Okay, for those that are not familiar with Knight Frank, let me give you a little bit of a brief overview. Knight Frank's the largest privately owned real estate consultancy in the world. We've got offices now in over 60 countries, over 500 offices, and just over 19,000 professionals around the globe. In the Middle East, we have a small office in Bahrain. Our hub is in Dubai, with offices in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi. The Middle East business is largely advisory and consultancy driven. Our core areas of business include advisory and consultancy, with specialist teams covering the hospitality and leisure sector, education, and of course healthcare. And we also have a transactional side to the business, both on the commercial side and on the residential side, where we do sales and lettings.
So this is like a brief introduction to the healthcare and education team. We started with Knight Frank in 2018, mid of 2018, and we've advised on projects and value projects worth in excess of $1.1 billion across primary and secondary cities in KSA as well as the UAE. In the last 2 years, we've come up with certain white papers and research reports. One of them has been with the Government of Dubai, which you can see on the left corner, as well as DHA, which was the Dubai Health Tourism Guide. Then we've done 2 research pieces on KSA and 1 very recent on Africa, which we issued last week. The type of services that we offer primarily include like feasibility studies, commercial due diligence, market studies, operator search and selection, leasing services, as well as transaction valuation work. We've got a medical doctor on our team in terms of team composition. We've got a medical doctor on our team to help with our healthcare, the healthcare component of our business. We've got 2 finance professionals and also our SES professionals as well to help with the real estate side of our business. The agenda for today is general discussion over COVID-19, the healthcare market size and transactions, healthcare real estate valuation, as in why and how we do it, the challenges that we face, and there'll be concluding remarks and Q&A. But please, if it'll be great if you can keep putting in your questions, and we'll be glad to field them as and when. You can please put them in the comment box. And if we can address them right away, we would. Otherwise, we will just collate them and then address all of them at the end. I hope that's all right with everybody. So when we look at COVID-19 from a world perspective, we've tried to collect data till this Sunday. And as per our reports, worldwide, we see that there are about 4.52 million cases with a day-on-day growth rate of about 2.3%. In contrast, if we look at the UAE, we've got about 23,000 cases till Sunday and a growth rate of about 3.64, which is slightly higher than the world average. But in terms of mortality rates are concerned, the global mortality rate is at about 6.95, while we're sitting at less than 0.5. Since the inception of COVID, we've been talking to certain healthcare operators within the region, and the thing is that we've come up with a dilemma of differing perspectives. I'd like to put this out now, and then this will be followed by a poll as well, which everybody can feed into. That'd be great. So the thing is that that when we're talking to healthcare professionals within the sector, we saw that there were completely two different stark perspectives, and like some were saying that perspective A was that telemedicine is becoming more mainstream, and especially after increased acceptance by insurance providers, this will challenge the hub and spoke model employed by a lot of healthcare service providers. Then there are people who are talking about reduced demand based on population. Because of COVID and because of the economic challenges, there might be a reduction in overall population within the GCC, especially because a lot of expats might be relocating back to their home countries. This would, in general, reduce the demand for healthcare services. Then there is an economic impact. We've seen that a lot of companies have revised the salary structures, and this may also result in revision of the healthcare insurance that have been provided. So potentially, it could be a scenario whereby we may not have the same insurance packages, and we could not afford the same sort of, let's just say, healthcare facilities that we could have previously enjoyed in the older healthcare insurance packages. Then, of course, then there is a change in habit towards visiting clinics. People now would stay away from going to clinics. Previously, it was such that people would just go to a clinic even if they had a minor cold and flu, but now they would avoid something like this. And of course, one of the larger pictures that one of the larger points that was raised by a lot of healthcare practitioners was that because of suspension of elective procedures and reduced outpatient footfall, it has put a strain on healthcare providers' cash flows. Plus, insurance payment delays would also create greater problems for the healthcare sector in general. But if we, on the other hand, if we look at the other perspective, some said that there's clearly a lack of supply. Otherwise, healthcare services would not have been halted during this time. And they're talking about increased in demand for healthcare services going forward, especially for internal medicine, due to the forced sedentary lifestyle that people have had to adopt during COVID. And I'm sure a lot of people have put in inches around their waist. Then there's some talking about nutrition management, physiological care, and a lot of people are now considering proactive care services to ensure immunity levels are maintained. Then the other thing is that a lot of hospitals might be looking at change of designs of the hospital facility itself to make them more dynamic so that they don't get paralyzed in the event of a pandemic. Then there was also a conversation about reducing outpatient rooms, as doctors would then be dealing with a lot of patients remotely. And probably others were talking about hospital size more relative to Saudi Arabia here, where the hospital sizes they would consider smaller hospital sizes with a wider reach around the city rather than having larger 200, 300 bed facilities and being concentrated in one place. And the last point was that elective surgery bottlenecks. Once this COVID is over, a lot of these surgeries will come back, and that will create a massive bottleneck and in the sector, and will lead to the revival of healthcare in general, as people will become more and more comfortable with going back to the healthcare facilities prior to COVID.
Okay, what I just want to talk about now, as we're looking at the attributes of healthcare as a real estate asset class, I wanted to just give a bit of context to this by sharing what the impact has been of COVID on the wider real estate values in the first 4 months of the year. I sit on the global valuation board with Knight Frank and have frequent calls with colleagues around the different offices, and we we share details on what's happening to the regular valuations that we're doing in different geographies. And so this will lead on to talk about healthcare valuation in due course. But I mean, what we're seeing now across different asset classes around the globe, if we look at Asia, which sort of was the earliest entrant into the COVID situation, we've seen in Singapore, we've seen grade A, and this is from 1st of January. This is we track these because we value for a lot of funds on a quarterly basis. So the 31st of December would be a fund quarter day, and then we have revaluations 31st of March and an upcoming one in June. So we can track how these values have moved. We're seeing 5 to 10% downward shift in valuations for grade A offices in Singapore. Retail is hardest hit. Government there are providing some tax rebates and passing those on to the tenants to smooth things out. The hotel market in Singapore has been very, very badly impacted. 5 to 7% downward shift in the values there. Hong Kong, we're seeing shopping centre values fall in the first 4 months of the year, 5 to 10%. Other retail more aggressively hit, maybe 15% downshift in value. Offices, 5 to 15%, depending on prime or secondary stock. Interestingly, industrial, if we're talking about logistics, values are considered quite stable. This is one of the few asset classes that's arguably performing quite well due to the demand for e-commerce. Hotels, again, in Hong Kong have been quite badly hit with 15 to 20% drops in value already this year. In the UK, which is one of the more mature markets, we've seen minimal market activity in terms of transactions. Banks are not really keen to lend, not signing off transactions at the moment. Offices, again, all these will vary, but we're seeing sort of a 2 to 5% downward shift in values. Industrial assets fairly stable. Retail being hit a little bit worse. It was already under pressure in the UK, but we've seen that sector really take a hit, up to 30% down shifts in values. Hotels similarly hit, up to 20% down. And in Europe, we're seeing a little bit of lifting restrictions. Countries are afraid of a possible second wave, but again, there's minimal transactions of deals. So we are seeing some downward movements there. Offices around 10%, retail more than 20%, and industrial again being relatively stable. We'll come on to sort of look at implications for the healthcare sector as well.
So we've started our poll as well. You will see that you can go ahead and start filling out the poll as well while you listen to us. And I've got a couple of people saying that the mic quality or the voice quality is not very clear. I hope it is improved now. I've just messaged our IT person, and probably he's just dealing with it right now. So in terms of healthcare market size and transactions, this will be a quick run through that we will do. When we talk about the market size and transactions, we see that the global healthcare spending is close to about $7.7 trillion as of 2017 and expected to reach about $10 trillion by 2022. This is the data from Deloitte representing a CAGR of about 5%. When we look at the GCC, we see that the CAGR is closer to 7% over the same period. And when we talk about the healthcare market size, we're referring to the healthcare goods and services that are consumed each year. When we're discussing the note on how what are the drivers for healthcare spending, it's population growth in these countries, aging population. Yes, I do understand that the population is quite young in these countries, But as we proceed 10, 15 years down the line, we will see that I mean the population over 60 will increase to as high as 5 times for a lot of these countries, and between 3 to 5 times in a lot of these countries. And the healthcare requirements will be changing considerably to meet their needs. Then the accelerated urbanization that is going on, rollout of mandatory health insurance, which will again create an impetus towards the private healthcare sector, and greater prevalence of chronic and non-communicable diseases, clinical technology and advances. All of them will have a positive impact towards the healthcare spend going forward. When we look at this in context to the population, as in per capita spend, we see that the top 10 countries in the world, I mean, their expenditure is between 4 and 9 times that of the GCC countries, and this shows that once our population pyramid starts mimicking what their population pyramid is looking like, probably our spend factors will carry on increasing. In terms of when we talk about transactional sort of data, we see that that since 2014 we've seen transactions to the tune of $300 billion and plus, and more than 2,500 transactions per annum. The transaction or deal count is denoted by the blue line. And what we see is that I mean, this is an area of interest. There's an area of interest, and a lot of deal activity takes place. And post COVID-19, we might see some more transactions, but maybe due to consolidation in nature.
Okay, in terms of the institutionalization of the markets in the form of the REITs in the UAE and especially in Saudi Arabia has really had very little focus on healthcare real estate to date. Of the 17 listed REITs on the Tadawul, only 2 of those REITs have got any exposure to healthcare at all. Those are a small clinic in one of the REITs, and recently the Al Salam NMC hospital was acquired by the Al Raji Capital REIT. So as the charts show, the REITs have typically been very diversified in the Middle East rather than thematic. We don't in the short term really see that changing due to the market conditions, but it might not only be due to market conditions that there's not being more healthcare assets in these REITs. It's probably due to the lack of investable product. So that the REITs and institutional investors would like more exposure to this sector, we believe, but there's just not the viable assets to allow them to do so. In the UAE, there's obviously very few listed REITs, and they're quite diversified with no real healthcare exposure. But again, we've seen investors go into the more defensive sectors. We've seen a lot of investment in the education sector that typically offers long leases, secure income, and although that sector is under a little bit of pressure now, we do see healthcare as being defensive and less volatile.
So in this section, we'll be covering healthcare real estate valuation. Why do we need it? Challenges and methodology, factors to consider when applying the valuation methodology, and which is primarily the real body of this presentation.
Okay, so why do we need to value healthcare assets? Well, same reasons really as we value any other real estate generally. The principal reasons we get instructed to help clients in this sector, loan security backed finance. If the real estate, the healthcare real estate is held on the balance sheet, we are often asked to value them for their annual financial statements. The mergers or acquisitions, corporate activity, often these need to be underwritten with an independent valuation. IPOs, where real estate forms part of that, and increasingly what we're seeing is sale and leaseback transactions, which is where we're trying to create an investment product.
and also for insurance purposes. Okay. So we will come on to our suggested approach for healthcare assets shortly, but just to give a very simple summary of the principal approaches to valuing real estate. Number one is the comparable approach, where we compare a property with other similar ones that have sold in the market with similar attributes. It's mostly relevant for homogeneous property types, residential, land, or non-income producing assets. Obviously, no two healthcare assets are the same. They don't offer the same treatments. They don't have the same facilities, and therefore it's not hugely relevant to healthcare. Second is the cost approach. That's an approach that's typically used where there's no market for property, and it's based on the principle that a buyer would not ostensibly pay more than the costs to obtain an asset of equal utility. A residual approach to valuation is typically used for assets under development or land with a defined planning consent. And finally, the income approach, and this is typically used for income producing assets or assets that are capable of producing an income stream. So there we're really deriving a value from the net operating income and application of a cap rate or yield. So we'll come on to this more when we look at healthcare.
So the challenges and methodologies what we're going to be addressing going forward. When we look at the challenges for healthcare real estate valuation, we effectively in the world of real estate, and even when we're talking about equity valuation, we understand that the healthcare is a defensive asset. It's a low beta asset where the cash flows are relatively less volatile than when compared to most sectors in times of uncertainty. But from a particular healthcare real estate point of view, the challenges that we face is that these assets are unique. Each asset has a different character and sets it apart, which is why people prefer one facility over another. They're not identical, unlike apartment and offices, whereby a direct comparison can be made. Lack of comparable transactions, because this is primarily because of the frequency of the transactions, and also quantum to create a good set of comparable transactions to compare off from, and of course the regulatory requirements which we have to look at other than the quality of the asset itself. So what we mentioned was that when we're looking at healthcare real estate valuation, what Steve alluded to earlier was that we consider the income approach, and in doing so, what we do is that we need to determine the theoretical rent that the facility can theoretical approach. Sorry. So this is the approach to valuing healthcare property asset is a very income approach, like I mentioned earlier, and what we call this as a relief from rent method, or the affordable rent method. It is what portion of the earnings can be attributed towards the rent of the real estate asset from the operations, right? And in another way, you can look at it as the value represents rent savings the subject asset will generate on a present value basis if rented on an arm's length transaction between market participants. In general, this rent should not technically strain the financial resources of the operations of the entity, which is why the affordable rent ranges between a quarter and a third of the EBITDA, and not more in most circumstances. And the factors that result in the movement of the theoretical rent between a quarter and a third depends on where the asset sits on the life cycle, the growth potential of the asset, and additional investments required to maintain the operational growth as described earlier. So how do we tackle this? What we do is that we employ, when we're looking at the income profile of the hospital, what we do is that we employ experts, such as we got the healthcare expert, we got the financial experts, and we got the real estate experts. So when we talk about the healthcare expert, what he's doing, or the medical professional on our team, he would be looking at the demographic profile, he'll be looking at the academic profile and the disease trends. He'll be also analyzing, going through primary research and analyzing and getting insights from healthcare operators and understanding the current infrastructure of the healthcare facility, market trends, review the services being offered by the hospital itself, and then challenge the assumptions that are made in the forecasts of the healthcare facility, in the financial forecast of the healthcare facility. Here, the financial expert is then looking at the historical financial statements, the key performance indicators, the normalized earnings, and then go back right into the forecast with the healthcare operator, the healthcare professional, to challenge the assumptions and to ensure that the assumptions employed are not unreasonable. And once we have the cash flow stream and that is agreed with the management, then a theoretical rent is technically backed out from the earnings before interest, tax, and depreciation and amortization, which, like I mentioned earlier, could be between a quarter and a third of the EBITDA. And and during this time, the real estate experts are evaluating the site from a real estate perspective, ensuring that they're meeting all the regulatory requirements and the building is in good condition, and any of those factors regarding the building would then of course be factored into how we look at the earning potential of the asset, and then the affordable rent or the theoretical rent line is then discounted at a cap rate using the market data that we have on caps and discount rates and yields. So what we've done here is, in the following slide, we've tried to summarize this and how we're looking at the affordable rent. How do we move up and down the affordable rent paradigm or the range, and how the yields are impacted as well. So when we're looking at affordable rent, the factors that really come into play are the operational risk and the asset age, whilst the yields capture the market risk and covenant strength. So when we're looking at the operation, just to dwell a bit deeper into this, we talk about the stage of the business life cycle. We talk about the service offered, the financial performance, historical, the accreditations that they have. Then we are also when we're looking at the financial position, we're also talking about the rate of insurance rejections. We're talking about non-recurring items in the income statement, the working capital cycle, and how that's being affected overall. We're also referring to the location. When we talk about location from this perspective, we're looking at it from a competition perspective, and also what the catchment area is like. So what type of people are living in the area? Does the hospital price points fit in with the population? Is the new competition or the new healthcare facilities coming in the area that may actually impact the overall inflow of the patients? And what are the services that are in demand in a particular area based on what we have understood from the market versus what the current healthcare facility is offering?
Okay, yeah, and from a physical perspective, we need to consider the physical condition itself. So how old is the facility? How heavy on repairs and maintenance is it? How efficient is the MEP systems? Any structural issues, building maintenance contracts, making sure that it's got good contracts and insurances in place. The older the facility, if it's a facility that's been, let's say, refurbished or converted from another facility, it might be a bit heavier on the wear and tear and the costs, which means there's not as much available cash to go to that affordable rent. From a sort of a tenant and a contractual perspective, things that that we're really looking for to drive the value and looking at the impacts on the cash flow risk, really would be things like the creditworthiness or the covenant strength of the tenant. So what's the balance sheet like of the operator here? Looking at the management team, is it a very established management team? How proactive are they? What's the vision like? Are they looking to grow the business? Are they just, or is it a very established family business that's really not going to go anywhere further? Look at the length of the lease, rental escalations that might be in that contractual lease. So, what happens to your running yields and your returns? repairing liabilities. You know, a lot of these agreements that we see are triple net, so that the operator takes all the responsibility for the repairs and maintenance, so he has control over those. Are there any break clauses in the lease? So for that security of income. And then I think importantly going forward, security provisions. So things like corporate rental guarantees, post-dated rent checks. These are very important in the current market to secure the cash flows. Okay. We've seen very few arm's length healthcare real estate transactions really in the Middle East to guide as to yields and returns in the region. Most of the deals have been private equity deals where the business has been acquired, and not really a strict standalone real estate play like you may see in the US or the UK and the more mature markets. What we've tried to do here in this slide is, this is really an opinion of ours on prime real estate yields in different asset classes in the UAE, and we're using Dubai as the most mature market here, and also in Saudi, where Riyadh is the most mature market. And we can broadly see, again, some of these are sentiment driven, so there's not perhaps been a prime transaction, let's say, in the retail super regional mall space. But if there was to be one, this is our opinion of investor appetite, should there be such an asset brought to market. And you can see there very broadly, the range is broadly between 7 and 8.5%. And if we compare that with the rest of the world, you know, you look at the UK and you've got prime yields of 3 to 4% in certain asset classes. So there's still some value in this region. It's very location specific, ownership specific, and just in terms of deals we have seen, again, there's not been a glut of transactions, but we have seen some clinics trade in the UAE around the 7% mark, very small lot size, so quite viable. We've seen a little bit of transactions taking place in Saudi. We saw the Al Salam and MC Hospital acquired by a REIT for about 160 million SAR at the turn of the year. But we've not really seen anything huge in that strict, you know, standalone retail space. And I think that's largely driven by the lack of assets and the lack of product. We think that given the long income that traditionally is associated with healthcare, that and the fact it is defensive and should effectively be relatively secure, it shows fairly good resilience if you look at the other asset classes in the market here. And really what we wanted to show in the next slide, we capture that really, is really just, this is a Knight Frank yield guide. I don't know whether you can read it in detail, but this is effectively, this is the UK, but this is showing what prime yields have done across all different asset classes in the last 12 months. So from May 19 to May 2020, and how they've moved on a month-by-month basis for the last 6 months. Obviously, sentiment across all asset classes is negative generally, with the exception of healthcare, prime logistics, and food retail. So you can see, you know, retail, general retail is down, offices are down, hotels are certainly down, but let's say the more alternative real estate classes, and we've got student accommodation there that's long let, healthcare assets that are long let, and again the emphasis is on long let, so long income, long leases. Then the sentiment there is pretty stable, and we're not seeing yields move out. So I think that that shows that this asset class, you know, can be fairly resilient, and that's sort of where, you know, I think it makes quite a compelling case, really, that if there was the product available, there would be a lot of, well, I think there is a lot of pent-up demand if the right assets are brought to market. So I think in sort of summary, the way, what is key for us when you're looking at one of these assets is, as Shazad elaborated, is trying to ensure that the traditional framework for these type of assets is a long lease, and it's key to understand the rent that's being put into that transaction is affordable. So that needs a lot of careful consideration, and then the rest of it is arguably relatively simple. We're looking at a cap rate, we're looking at the lease terms, but the key thing to do is to have that analysis of the rent that's being put in place. Is it affordable? Is it sustainable? Can the operator pay for that and still make their repairs and maintain the asset? But that's kind of how we think it should be looked at, and our sort of views.
Yes, that brings us to the end of our presentation. It'll be great if we can have some questions, or if there are any clarifications, we would love to field that. What's your outlook for the UAE? Yeah, so the thing is that we believe that there might, for within the UAE, this country, or let's just say the healthcare sector, might suffer in the short term, primarily because, well, the thing is that it will all depend on how many expatriates actually leave the country. You know, we saw that, I think in the beginning of this month, about 25,000 people already left towards their home country. And you know, if this trend carries on, then we might see that there will be an impact on the overall health sector. The other part that we also alluded to was that, you know, a lot of salary packages, there have been revisions to salary packages, and if this COVID gets prolonged, and if we start looking at the end of next year, then again our insurance packages and everything would have an impact. So potentially there may be a bit more negatives than positives. But then again, I think I should say this with a lot of caution when I say there'll be more negatives than positives, because there'll still be a lot of let's just say elective procedures that still need to be undertaken, you know, and there'll be a lot of other facilities, a lot of preventive care and all these sort of softer healthcare issues that would need to be addressed, which might balance the scale. But as we all know, in the UAE, we also receive a lot of medical tourists. I mean, yes, a lot of them are coming. A lot of them, they're only a handful. I mean, about 350 to 400,000 medical tourists that come under the medical tourism ambit. But there are a lot of people that come from the GCC or the Middle East for a lot of cosmetic-related treatment, a lot of infertility-related treatment, and all these other treatments that might come to a complete standstill to the time the airlines are not back on track, and we don't have to take so many precautionary measures of being in quarantine and everything when we land in a particular country. So at the moment, I'm not sure whether I've answered your question, but it is, but it can go either way. Is how we're looking at it. Does anybody else have a view on it? It'll be great to have that. What is your outlook for UAE in the real estate generally here? How do you see the market compared to 2009 and 2010, especially given greater supply?
Okay, so the question was, what do we think the outlook is for the real estate market generally in the UAE versus 2009, especially given greater supply? Look, I think you know, my own opinion, and we have a house view, but I think the market was already under pressure in most sectors in the UAE. certainly on the residential side. The supply of units to be delivered this year will obviously slow down somewhat, but those will just get pushed back into 2021 probably. So the supply will still, if it's advanced, it will still be delivered, which will, with an outward movement of labour, as Shazad mentioned, a lot of 25,000 expats leaving, I think will exacerbate the situation. I think the rents and capital values for residential will continue to soften a bit. I think it actually, residential seems to be really representing quite good value at the moment, because a lot of the agents are quite sort of bullish with the LTV rules being changed. If people are taking a long-term view, it shows some value. So I think there is pent-up demand there, but the supply dynamics are not great. In the office sector, I think it's going to be adversely impacted in the short to medium term. Again, we've got quite a big supply-demand dynamic, a lot of excess supply, and I think you'll see a greater diversion between prime and secondary. I think secondary and very tertiary office buildings will struggle to lease up, and values will be impacted. And there'll be a flight to quality as the prime ones, perform better. Retail will suffer. It's whether you can stop a super regional mall that's under construction. So, for me, that sector has to put the brakes on. I think that the GLA is due to increase hugely in the next couple of years. Hospitality will be impacted a lot as well. So the short term is not great, really. I would say for the UAE, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure and downward valuations across most asset classes.
Next question that's come in is, do you see many malls closing in the next couple of years?
Difficult question. I think malls were already under pressure, and I think they were having to sort of reposition themselves, become a bit more leisure and entertainment oriented anyway. Potentially, yes. I think the big, more established malls will survive because they'll adapt and they'll change their sort of their ways of selling and ways of engaging with customers. But the smaller, older malls, may well close. We've seen that with some of the older malls in Saudi. Again, it'll be a flight to quality. The retailers will want to be in the better malls, and depending on how long this goes on, it's going to follow the rest of the world. We don't see we're not sort of insulated from the rest of the world. We look at what's happening in the UK and US. It's moving that way slowly, and I think you will see some of the poorer stock close down. Won't be viable.
We've got another question that comes through is, what should be the key considerations in the current scenario when valuing a healthcare asset?
I think we kind of touched on those a bit, but I mean to keep it very, very simple, most of these healthcare assets, if there's no lease in place, then really you're looking at that affordable rent as an element of your EBITDA. So I think it's really trying to the key thing, I think, is having that business knowledge to see to look at the financials and see, right, what are these operations doing? Are they optimized? Could they be doing a lot better? And therefore, what is an affordable rent on a long-term basis? And then if you can get that part right, it then depends on the lease structure that you're going to put in place for such a property, and then your yield will be driven by how good the covenant is, how long is that lease, what are your escalations, what is your security provisions. So I think it's two bits, but getting the first bit right, that affordable rent, and this is where we've got medical doctors and accountants to really look through the P&Ls of these these operations, and the rest of it, I'm not saying it's simple, but the rest of it will follow.
And I think we also probably need to look at different scenarios. I mean, which we would have to chalk out in the forecasts with the management as well. That, you know, I mean, what is the best case, the, you know, middle case, and the worst case when we are looking at the forecasts, because and how we see the sector bounce back post COVID, that'll be critical as well. Then the question is, when do you think medical tourism will come back to UAE, Egypt, and Turkey? UAE, Egypt, and Turkey, and how will it ramp up? Well, this is a difficult question. It's a difficult question because I'm no ball gazer. But the thing is that once I think it would all have to depend on, you know, how the airlines start picking up, and of course accepting people. What are the limitations for people to when they arrive at a country, in a particular country, would they have to do like a 14-day quarantine and everything? Because if all these places, all these things are in place, it will be quite difficult for medical tourism to bounce back very quickly in any country. But I think the sooner all that is there, and the overall and also people considering and looking at and looking at travel the same way as they used to. I mean, that mindset will also be playing an important role in this. And of course, I think right now, if I'm not mistaken, that there's a lot of conversation about, you know, whether travelers will be sitting next to each other, or will they have that gap between different travelers. And if that's the case, then the cost of travel will become very expensive, making probably overall value proposition. We will probably be losing out on the overall value proposition of traveling to another country for better medical care, and also cheaper medical care in most of the cases, especially people traveling to Egypt and Turkey. Then, considering departure.
Expects a reduction in remuneration packages, the GCC Hospital Band Gap narrowing.
Yes, yes. Sorry, the question is, considering the departure of expats and reduction in your remuneration package in general, is the GCC Hospital Band Gap narrowing? It's too early to say now, but we are doing a small analysis as of probably next week. We should be done by our analysis next week, and we'll be issuing a small white paper or thought piece on this, and try and see, you know, how the bed density stacks up with the rest of the world. If we look at it as of now, even though we are sitting at close to 2 beds per 1,000 population for Abu Dhabi, but that actually translates to about 3.25 beds, 3.4 beds actually per 1,000 population. If we compare that with the OECD countries, it's primarily because how our population pyramid sits as against their population pyramid. So, so we're trying to do some analysis on this, and we should definitely come back with some results on different scenarios that we, along with probably be using Oxford Economics and a few other reputed research houses to see how what their forecast for the population movement would be in the next couple of years, and then try and factor this thing in. There's one more question that's come up. Scroll up now. Yes, scroll down. There we go. Yeah, I think this is a question for you. Wouldn't the already struggling office sector be further impacted by the new mode of working remotely now being commonly adopted?
Yeah, so yeah, the question was, would the already struggling office sector be further impacted by the new mode of working remotely now being commonly adopted? yeah, I think the full extent of that is not quite yet known, but I think, yes, I think people have got quite used to the work from home thing. And, you know, I think the workplace is going to change, densities will change, requirements will change, and yes, that may lead to less requirements or offices scattered around cities. Yeah, I mean, it's already under pressure, the market. There's already a vacancy rate of 20–30%. So, you know, I think it's certainly not going to help in the short term.
Yeah. Then, is this interest in healthcare investment already being acted upon in Africa? Which countries are investors going and why? Well, in general, Africa is, at least prior to COVID, was quite exciting. We saw a lot of interest and a lot of consolidation sort of activities going on. Some funds had also entered, private equity funds had also looked to acquire a couple of healthcare operations. So probably, I mean, from a very real estate perspective, it's going to be those countries that are slightly more developed, because we did a survey with a few private equity houses, some REIT funds who were looking at Africa actively, and they were looking at, you know, countries, they were looking at the more developed countries such as Kenya, Uganda, within Africa, whereby they were looking at, where they were thinking that, you know, I mean, I'm just talking about general sub-Saharan Africa, and of course South Africa itself, where the asset category, the quality of asset itself is investment grade, so that foreign investment, so that they can have foreign investment in them. But if the asset quality itself is not investment grade, irrespective of the operations, people will still be shying away from it. So it's going to be exciting times for Africa as a continent itself, and we should be looking at some more transactions over there, because there is a massive gap in terms of healthcare infrastructure. And talking to our different offices within the region, we realize that, you know, this gap has been announced loud and clear to all the governments, and it's something that they need to be acting upon very soon. Hope that answers the question. Are there any special initiatives to bring medical tourists to UAE? Turkey has recently announced a plan to bring medical tourists, non-COVID, from 29 countries. Yes, I read this as well, but the thing is that I am talking to the Dubai Health Experience, and probably will be having a meeting post-Eid to understand exactly what do they plan to do, and how do they plan to, let's just say, bring back tourists or medical tourists from different parts of the world. But if we look at our data set of medical tourists actually coming to the UAE, we find that a lot of them are from the GCC countries and the African countries. So it all depends on how the flights and everything have started, because what we are seeing right now is a lot of the flights are towards the European countries that have started from UAE, and as well as the subcontinent and Far East Asia. But that's where not majority of the patients are actually coming in from. I hope that answers the question. Let's see if we have any more. No, I think that's it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for attending this webinar. We will be sharing the results of the poll very soon, and I hope you found this discussion informative and interesting. And you can definitely get in touch with us, if probably offline or maybe later next week or this week, if there is any other questions that we can field for you. Thank you again.